Kevin Cleary here with a knife video for you, and today I want to talk about the value of YouTube knife reviews. This is going to be a little bit of self-inspection or self-reflection, as well as some commentary on what I commonly see in reviews, and finally, a little bit of discussion of what I'm trying to do with a review and what I think a review is capable of versus perhaps what it's not so capable of. Now, the first thing we have to ask is, why do you watch knife reviews anyway? What are you looking for? Is it just to see if you want to buy stuff? Okay, because if that's the case, one, I guess depending on your budget, but if that's the case, you don't need to watch that many videos, right? Because not every knife is going to be appealing to you. And even if some reviewer says this is the greatest thing ever, if you don't think it's attractive, if you don't think it's interesting, then it doesn't matter. So there's not going to be as much to watch. Although there may be more to gain in a knife video for you, more money left in your pocket, or perhaps more taken out of your pocket, depending on what you think of the knife after you get to see it in video for a little bit of time. But if you're like me and you just like knives in general, then maybe there's a little less value in each video. Okay, it's not actually affecting a real buying decision in every case. However, there's more entertainment value in a particular given video. All right, and so as a reviewer, I need to strike some balance between that, because I know there are a lot of people who are coming and watching something, they're not subscribers, they're not anything. All they know is, hey, I'm interested in buying this new knife and I want to learn a little bit about it to see if it's a dumb decision before I pull the trigger. And so I try to include everything that a person from that category would want, while also trying to make it interesting for someone like me who really just likes knives and wants to kind of talk about them and hear about them and learn about them. All right. So some combination of those two efforts is what informs my my video making plans and informs what I try to tell you about a knife. And so now that we've kind of gotten that part of the philosophy side out of it, let's ask, what can a video actually deliver? What can a knife reviewer do for you that you perhaps can't do for yourself? Okay, and so I think there are some things. First of all, knives. All right, just in this picture right here, and I'm going to add a couple of more into this discussion. All right, so just this picture alone probably represents more folding knives than the average person has. And this doesn't cover my whole collection, and it doesn't come anywhere near covering the number of knives that I've handled. And there are lots of reviewers out there who have handled and experienced more knives than I have. All right, so one of the valuable things that a knife reviewer can bring to a discussion is the fact that they've handled lots of other knives. They kind of have a sense for what's out there, what features work and don't work for them. They've had experience with different kinds of locks, different knife manufacturers, different approaches to various problems that come along when designing a knife. And because they can draw on that experience, they should be able to assess a given knife. Okay, so perhaps, when I tell you about a knife like this, right, I can tell you about some of the other Spyderco backlocks I've had, how they performed, what I thought of them, what their strengths and weaknesses are, because I've had, 5 or 6 or 10 other Spydercos with similar mechanisms. When I handle a lock like this, I can compare it to other backlocks or backlock variants, whether it be the Triad lock or, the Spyderco backlock, or maybe, I think of the Buck Marksman with the strap lock. So there are some experience that hopefully a good reviewer can bring to bear and share with you as it applies to the particular knife in question that perhaps all the viewers don't have. Now, certainly there are going to be some viewers watching this who have more knives than I do, and that's great, and they'll have a lot of that experience themselves. Now, I would dare say that probably those people don't need to watch as many reviews, because you probably have knives that are so close to the one that you're thinking of buying next that you already kind of know what it's going to be like, and you have that experience to draw on. And in fact, that is a thing. I talked about this with some other knife guys recently when we were, just sort of chatting back and forth. As you gain more experience and as you build a collection, you pretty quickly start to learn what you like and what you don't like. You can take a look at a knife in a picture and have a pretty good idea of whether or not it's for you just by looking at, the looks of the knife and the specs. And so you don't need that review as much. Now, there are some things you can't learn without having a knife in hand, and hopefully a reviewer is able to share some of those things with you. Now, I will add a couple of points here, and that is a good knife reviewer is going to, in addition to their experience with lots of different knives, they're going to add a certain amount of knowledge of the industry, and I hope they're kind of keeping up with some of that, but also they're going to bring their experience to bear, and that experience has to be kind of considered here. So if you're watching a knife reviewer who, works 100% in an office, never gets outside, never does anything sort of adventurous with their knives, then that's a particular perspective, and they're going to probably like a certain kind of knife. If you're talking to someone who's around water all the time, for example, they're probably going to love this knife. Well, for you, this might be a much better option. So we've got the Spyderco Siren here, the Spyderco Paramilitary 2 here, the Cold Steel 8015, the Manix 2 Lockback from Spyderco, and I'll try to let you know what all the other knives are as I bring them in. I have a bad habit of forgetting about that. But you got to think, right? If this person a hunter, are they a soldier? Do they work in an office? Are they a hiker? Are they a construction worker? Do they do a lot of camping? Do they do a lot of boating? Do they play a lot of sports? Like whatever their life primarily involves is going to be brought to bear on a folding knife. So, if someone, I don't know, maybe they go running in the woods every day and they want to have a knife that they can keep on their person so that if something happens in the woods, they've got that tool available. Well, any knife that's more than, 3.5 ounces is probably going to be horrible for them to run with, and they're not going to like it, right? So if you don't do that, if that's not part of your life and not part of your need, then you're probably not going to agree a whole lot with that reviewer. So keep that in mind. While they're bringing experience, their experience may be quite different from yours and maybe quite different from the intentional design of the knife. The other thing that knife reviews can bring are details. All right, there are some things that you can notice just by taking a look at a knife. So I can tell just by looking, I've got a satin finish here. If this was just a picture, right, imagine. Now I know it's a lockback. I can see that it's Torx construction. I can see G10. I can't tell much about the texturing, but I can see that there's jimping here. I can see that, well, if I get a good look, I can see that it's an S30V blade. I may not know how thin it is behind the edge. I may not know how thick it is. I probably don't know how much it weighs. I don't know how it feels in hand. Okay, so there are certain things that I can get from a picture, but I'm hoping that a knife review is going to give me a little more. How does it feel going in and out of pocket? What are the washers like? What, is there a hot spot somewhere? Let's take a look at all of the little things that may add up to make a knife really, really good or really, really poor. Okay, what does the thumb stud feel like? Is it sharp? Is it aggressive? Or is it fine? Is the jimping sharp? Okay, and again, that's a little subjective. I have pretty high tolerance for sharp jimping, so I'm going to be like, it's fine. And I know I've had people complain to me that, when I talk about cold steels, I should emphasize more the difficulty of the lock. To me, the Triad lock is not that difficult. All right, so that's an experience and a certain bias that I bring. I'm rarely going to complain about the difficulty of a Triad lockback because I don't find it, honestly, all that difficult. Okay, so again, these are things that hopefully a review can do that can be of value to you as a viewer. Now, they may, now here's the other side of that. They may notice some stuff that you don't care about. All right, so perhaps a reviewer talks about this knife and how deeply it goes in pocket. I really don't care how deeply it goes in pocket. That is just not a consideration for me. Furthermore, I really don't need a YouTuber to tell me about it because I can see, right? I don't need anyone to tell me that this pocket clip is going to fit deeper than this one. I can tell immediately as soon as I look at it. So I don't really need that to be part of a discussion. And, you know, if I kind of line up a few clips, I think you'll right away be able to tell which one is going to, you know, carry deepest in the pocket versus which one is going to show a little more knife. Okay, so there's a few different clip options, and it's pretty obvious that this one's deepest, this one's medium, this one, and this one are going to stick out the most, right? You don't have to, I don't need to do much, all I really need to just show you a picture and you can kind of figure that out. But perhaps that's something, you know, I don't really care about, but maybe you do. And so I may emphasize it and you go, I don't really care how it carries in pocket. Something that I find a little more valuable, something you can't tell just by looking, is how tight are these? How difficult when you're walking around is it to get this in or out of your pocket? Now that is a discussion that, you know, you can't tell just by looking, but I'll tell you right now, these two are going to be the most difficult. Okay. That is something that a YouTuber can tell you and hopefully give you some value on. Now I want to talk about specs a little because a YouTuber can tell you about size and weight. I make a point of measuring and weighing all the knives myself and sharing with you my findings rather than just reading them off of a web page, because sometimes I find the description on the box or the description on a website are like nominal. You know, maybe they'll say, you know, a pair 2 has, I don't know, 3.5-inch blade. Well, it's actually, you know, 3 7/16, and that doesn't matter to everyone, but I want to be as accurate as I possibly can, so I'm going to do that. Now let me say this, I often waffle on this point. I sometimes think, why am I sharing these specs? They could literally look on any website and read it in 2 seconds. You know, some YouTubers use like a pause and read. The reason I continue to share it is because I have a habit, and maybe you don't share this, but I'll put a YouTube video on while I'm cooking supper. I'll put a YouTube video on while I'm, you know, cleaning or you know, doing something else. And so I may not always be looking directly at the screen. So I need the person to tell me, okay? So I can be listening and I'm on the other side of the room. I already know what this knife looks like because I watched the first portion of the video. Then I walked away to get a cup of coffee, but I'm still listening. And so when they tell me the blade length and the handle length and how it feels in hand, I can listen to all of that, and it has value to me to be able to have it spoken verbally rather than just, you know, placed up here on a card that you can read. And then finally, some comparisons. YouTubers can usually do a pretty good job of showing you a bunch of different knives, and hopefully some of those are going to be knives you're familiar with, that you've tried before, and that you know you either really like or really dislike. And so you can say, hey, I hate the Recon 1, and so if Kevin says this feels just like the Recon 1, that's going to be a pass for me. Right? That's all I'm trying to achieve when I give you some comparisons. As a secondary thought, perhaps I may be saying, hey, these could be some alternatives to this knife, but generally speaking, I don't have a big enough collection to do that in every case. So that's a far second. Okay, my first priority is more to hopefully share a knife that you're at least partially familiar with. Now, there are some weaknesses to what we can do on YouTube as well, and you need to keep these in mind. So I can talk about ergonomics, I can talk about how comfortable something feels in hand, but that's how it feels for my hand, right? There may be, you know, the Manix 2 is one of my favorite knives. I find it so comfortable, but there's probably somebody out there who doesn't find it comfortable at all. And in fact, I'll tell you a real story. One time I was talking about comfortable knives and I mentioned the Para 2 as just being so nice in hand. And I got a comment of someone saying, what are you talking about? It is the most uncomfortable knife I've ever felt. It's the worst thing I've ever had my hand on. And I was like, whoa, buddy, I doubt it's the worst thing you've ever had your hand on. But two, most people, like, you know, maybe you have the weirdest shaped hands imaginable or something, because most people find it pretty comfortable. But that just goes to show that hand sizes are different. You know, where you have calluses are different, whether you're, you know, if you work in construction or work in an office, if you're writing all day, if you have calluses on your hands from lifting weights, so like all of those things are going to make a difference to how a knife feels in hand. All right. And so that's, that's something that I can kind of tell you about, but you're going to have to kind of learn different reviewers and say, hey, I find if Kevin likes it, I'll probably like it. Or if Brian or Mark or whoever, whatever different knife reviewer you can think of likes it, then I'll probably like it. Or if they, maybe you'll find if Kevin thinks this knife is comfortable, I never find them comfortable, so I probably won't, right? Whatever the case may be, it's kind of building your knowledge there. All right. The other thing is, no matter what I do, there are certain things that I just cannot get through. Okay, so the 8010 has as sort of a unique feel. The detent is designed differently. It feels differently when deployed. It's quite enjoyable, but it's different. And to try and communicate that to you, to say, no, it doesn't feel like an 80. It doesn't feel like Recon 1. It doesn't feel like an 8010. It doesn't feel like a Rat Model 1. It's just something that is really, really hard to communicate well on video, right? I can tell you how smooth it is or how soft it is. I can tell you how stiff the detent is. I can tell you, if the thumb stud here is comfortable or uncomfortable. But in terms of how this actually feels, there's not much that I can do to really get that across effectively. And again, you may have to learn a little bit about particular reviewers. If I say I like something, maybe you will too. If I like, maybe you like softer detents, and we probably will disagree then on what we enjoy. Or maybe you like way stiffer detents than I do. But there are certain things that are very, very difficult to communicate on camera, and you kind of need to keep that in the back of your mind and draw on your own experience. And again, find reviewers who have similar taste to you. All right, and finally, let's talk about the big limitation here that's in the back of everyone's mind, and that is biases. All right, we all have biases for different reasons. You guys know I like larger stuff. You guys may or may not know that I like satin grinds, I like hollow grinds. Okay, so all of those things are my personal preferences. And so a knife that comes along that's a little bigger, that has a hollow grind, here's a good knife, for example. Does everyone like the Krispy Knives Nyala? Well, a lot of people do, but here's a knife that for me checks a lot of my personal boxes. Now it misses one important thing, and that is it's got a leather rather than Kydex sheath. That's not the end of the world for me, and I still really enjoy the knife, but those personal preferences are going to come in, and a good reviewer is going to tell you what those are. But also some reviewers are going to like lighter duty, EDC office carry knives. I definitely like the heavier duty, harder use type of stuff. Some people like fancy knives. They need Mokatai and Timascus, and they need zirconium on every knife. And for me, that's just not great. I don't really get into that. Maybe they have a military background, and so every knife has to be assessed as whether or not it could be an effective weapon. Maybe they have a bushcrafting background, and every knife has to be assessed as to whether or not it can, it can make feather sticks and build traps. Maybe they have a hunting background, and every knife, it's all about how well it skins an animal, how well it fillets a fish. All right, so all of those backgrounds come in as well. Finally, let's talk a little bit about influence and the thought, did you buy this knife? Was it given to you? Did you get a good deal on it? Did you get a bad deal on it? And that can be a difficult thing, and assessing value can be a difficult thing. So if you didn't pay for the knife, right, then maybe you feel better about it and are being more forgiving with it than you would be if you had paid for it. On the other hand, this is my problem. I tend to be, knives that were given to me for free, I tend to be really, really critical. Knives that make a bad first impression, I'm often very critical. Something puts me off about this knife, maybe a screw was stripped, and I maybe have the only one with a stripped screw, but boy, it's hard to give a positive review after that negative experience. Maybe you've had a negative experience with a company. I bought a bunch of SOGs because I really liked their designs when I was first getting into reviewing, and every single one of them had blade play. Well, it was pretty hard for me to give a fair, honest review of a SOG for a while because I was just had so much angst toward them. I'm like, these idiots can't make a knife that doesn't have blade play. Why do I even bother paying any attention to them whatsoever? All right. Maybe you Maybe you were given a knife by the company. So Spyderco didn't, but let's say Spyderco sent me this knife for review. Well, is there some pressure there to give a good review? Again, maybe, although I have a bad habit of being hypercritical then, so that any little issue that I wouldn't complain about if I bought the knife and was more emotionally invested in it, then I might not bring up. But I'm sharing all this with you guys, and I know it's sort of a stream of consciousness, this bias part. But I want to put out there that everyone has biases. I definitely do my best, and I think all of us do, to reduce those biases as much as possible. Let me add very quickly that there's very little financial incentive to share misinformation about a knife. It's primarily emotional incentive that you're dealing with. Even guys like some of the bigger channels that I could think of, maybe Gideon's Tactical, Nick Shabazz would be a good example, a couple of others. Like, none of these guys are going to ever be able to make enough money off a knife channel that they can like support a family or something. So it's just not feasible. So there's really very little financial incentive. I just want to throw that out there so people know, because I think sometimes people watch a YouTube channel like mine or like some of the others that are out there and they go, you know, this company probably paid them a lot of money to review this knife, and yeah, that just isn't happening. If I get a free knife from time to time, I consider myself extremely fortunate. And if you're a company watching this and you want to send me a bunch of free stuff, hey, feel free. I like knives. I like checking them out. I'm happy to do that. But basically, with very few exceptions, most reviewers that you're watching out there are losing a lot of money by having a knife channel, not making much. And you know, I have a dream that I could at least get my channel to break even, so it wasn't costing me anything to carry on the channel. The only thing that kind of keeps me going is you know, a lot of these knives I'd be buying anyway. So, do I find value in knife reviews? Well, absolutely. I enjoy, and let me tell you guys, as a way of conclusion, why I do this, and hopefully that'll give you a little bit of insight into my motivation here. So look, the fact is I just like knives, and I live in a place, and I'm sure most of you do as well, where there's not really many people to talk with about knives. So I make videos where I can talk to you guys, and it just gives me a chance to share some of my enthusiasm and some of my nerddom about knives with others who share similar interests. Hopefully, by watching these videos, you can have some fun. From time to time, I may help you save a little money. I hope I don't get you to spend too much. Hopefully these are helpful. Even if you don't buy the knife, there's some entertainment value there, and you can have a little bit of fun. Thanks a lot for watching, guys. Thinking of making money. If you want to check out my channel sponsors, that does help the channel. Essentially what happens is, you know, the more stuff you buy, the better discounts I can get, and therefore the more content I can deliver. All right, and guess what, guys? I buy the stuff anyway, even if I don't get much of a good discount. So my wallet would thank you profusely for patronizing those channel sponsors. It is a big help. Thanks for watching. We'll talk to you soon.